Before I begin, I know there are individuals who might consider themselves politically Democrat or politically Republican or politically something else. This is not a discussion about politics. For there are individuals here that might be conservative, might be liberal, and might be anything in between. Again, this is not about politics. And before I share what I'm about to share, I want to warn that there will be a comment and a quote that I will read verbatim, which might not be appropriate for everyone. For two issues which have occurred in the last month have truly appalled me, and I cannot remain silent about them. The first happened a little over 2 weeks ago when a third-year female Georgetown law student expressed her views to a special committee on contraception policy coverage. Her testimony innocently covered how this coverage of birth control was needed for reproductive as well as medical reasons, and included the story of her friend who needed contraceptive pills to stop the growth of an ovarian cyst. Now, after her testimony, and this is the first thing that bothered me, was Rush Limbaugh on his radio show stated matter-of-factly, "Can you imagine if you were her parents, how proud you would be? Your daughter testifies she's having so much sex, she can't afford her own birth control pills, and she wants the president to provide them, the Pope." Now, furthermore, he continues, what does it say about the college co-ed who goes before a congressional committee and essentially says that she must be paid to have sex? What does that make her? It makes her a slut, right? It makes her a prostitute. She wants to be paid to have sex. She's having so much sex she can't afford the contraception. She wants you and me, the taxpayers, to pay her to have sex. This verbiage is harsh. And I repeat it only to show that this rant and the word choices are completely ignorant of the contraceptive pills and usage of facts, spread lies based on faulty assumptions, and defame an innocent bystander. And he is given the opportunity to continue to do this on a daily basis to others without any repercussions. Is this isolated to him or to those on the political right? Of course not. This type of rhetoric is just one of many instances. Last month, the leftist activist Ken O'Keefe, a former Gulf War Marine veteran and passenger on the MV Mavi Marmara during the Gaza flotilla raid, was invited to speak on a university panel. In his comments, he exclaims, "I make no special bones about Jewish people, but the bottom line is this: the Jewish state," that's not my expression in his views, "the Jewish state of Israel is therefore acting on behalf of the Jewish people. You," and at this time he's referring to all the Jews attending the lecture, "like the Nazis, now have a special obligation. The decent Germans, the so-called decent Germans of World War II Nazi Germany, what did they do? What did the decent Germans do when the Nazis came to power and started to institute their policies? What did they do? They didn't do enough, did they? Did they do enough to stop the Nazis? No, they didn't. And what are the Jewish people doing right now? Are you doing enough to stop your racist, apartheid, genocidal state?" O'Keefe's comparison, linking Jews and Israel to Nazis, the same Nazis who systematically tried to kill every Jew, is illogical. Yet in this higher education institution and many others, untrue arguments and hateful speech are being passed off as simply freedom of speech. Too many people confuse freedom of speech as a free pass to incite fear, spread hateful language, and communicate intolerant views. Yet freedom of speech does not mean that we can say what we want to say, do what we want to do, and express what we want to express. It means that we are mature enough, strong enough, and good enough to control ourselves from saying hateful and derogatory remarks. Politics is not the issue. I repeat, politics is not the issue. Instead, the problem stems from charged rhetoric, which is designed to dehumanize the target of its venomous language. This type of language, by Limbaugh and O'Keefe, as well as others like them from both sides of the political spectrum, try to convince listeners to no longer see their targets as human beings. And sadly, the circulation of this narrow-mindedness continues, for proponents of both sides become deaf to the bigotry, blinded by apologies, and muted by allowing this behavior to repeatedly occur. And this we cannot and will not permit. With Purim behind us, we begin to prepare for Passover. When we retell our story, the one of being slaves in Egypt and freed from oppression, we evoke over and over again the biblical phrase, Veger lo taneh, velo tilchazenu, ki gerim hayitem be'eretz Mitzrayim. You shall not wrong a stranger or oppress him, for us, we were strangers in the land of Egypt. The Israelites, our ancestors, were tortured at the hands of the Egyptians. Yet this lie and the greater idea recalled each Passover reminds us that we cannot demonize people even if we really want to. Instead of passing irresponsible judgments or letting our emotion cloud our reasoning, we are charged never to find an excuse which prevents us from being empathetic to others. Our Talmud expands upon this comment by stating one should be among those who are persecuted rather than among those who persecute. While in reality, there are times to be passive and times to be aggressive, such as in self-defense or to establish a position in our society. When in a position to choose one way or the other, our rabbis tell us to opt for persecution rather than being a persecutor. Fascinatingly, this statement, made over 2,000 years ago, was at a time when the authors themselves were being tormented. Thus, in the midst of being discriminated against, our sages still tell us not to resort to the oppression of another person. In commenting on this idea, Rabbi Dov Elkin shares that the rabbis are surely conjuring up their historical memories of being driven out of their homes and saying to their disciples, don't ever let yourself be found in the position of the wicked Romans or Greeks who denied us our dignity, our rights, our humanness, and sometimes our very lives. It is better to be beaten, perhaps even to die, than to turn into a monster of a human being. We, however, do not live in the Talmud's generation. This hate-mongering I brought up previously that exists in our world, especially a world deemed modern and progressive, cannot be allowed to persist. Given our collective memory, we cannot continue to be silent as this vicious, demeaning, and defaming language against other human beings takes place. Our responsibility is to thwart attempts at those seeking to dehumanize another person for differing beliefs. Our responsibility is to rebuke those who attempt to rob others of their humanity. Our responsibility is to refuse to allow bigotry to redirect us from feeling any empathy for others. This weekend, we finish the book of Exodus, and upon its completion, we recite and actually exclaim the words, Chazak, Chazak, Venit Chazech. Be strong, and may we be strengthened. It's these words this evening that can offer us the courage to stand up against individuals resorting to hate-mongering and prejudice through charged rhetoric. And our charge moving forward is to stay informed. Read the papers, the Commercial Appeal, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. Watch the news, Fox, MSNBC, and BBC. Browse the internet for information on various sites, including those left, those right, and those with centrist leanings. And when we read, when we hear, and when we see something that is not acceptable or is intolerant of others, we can't be silent. We can't run away in disgust. We must confront the problematic nature of the rhetoric and share the information with each other so that we collectively can put an end to this hate-mongering. We are not helpless, as our rabbis felt they had to be 2,000 years before. We have technology, which allows us to post information instantly and not allow this partisanship to continue. With it, we do not have to go quietly in the night, and we never have to yield to despair. We can be victorious against these attempts at bigotry, intolerance, and dehumanization. Chazak, Chazak, Venit Chazech. Be strong, and may we be strengthened. For we are a people of eternal hope, optimism, and determination. Shabbat Shalom.